Good afternoon. This is Joe Lee. I am going to be moderating this session this afternoon for the Learning Exchange. Today's subject is going to be forming and sustaining source water collaboratives, and this is part of the Source Water Collaborative Learning Exchange webinar series. Next. The Source Water Collaborative is a group of 26 associations, organizations that work together as well as individually with their constituents to help policymakers, planners, agricultural interests, developers, citizens groups, and others integrate source water protection into key decisions, especially decisions concerning land use. Next. Today, the goal of the Learning Exchange is to provide a platform to share experiences, transfer knowledge, and learn about funding and technical resources for source water protection. It'll involve success stories, webinars and events, communications and social media, resources and tips. To celebrate and this was all established as part of the Source Water Collaborative's 10-year anniversary, and as such, as the Learning Exchange aims to strengthen the effectiveness of source water practitioners across the country by providing a platform to share this information. So next. There's been a series of there will be a series of 5 webinars for the Learning Exchange, and we have held a webinar in the end of August on creating creative partnerships. This Learning Exchange webinar is on forming and sustaining collaboratives. There will be 3 other webinars this year through December, and look forward to and look for notices on these upcoming webinars for funding ideas, nutrient reduction successes, and messaging. Next. Today the webinar is going to discuss forming and sustaining source water protection collaboratives, and this discussion will discuss engaging organizations with different missions, approaches, authorities, and funding, tailoring solutions to unique collaboratives, since no collaborative ever is a one-size-fits-all. They're all different because primarily the various partners involved in any source water individual and source water protection program have diverse goals and come from different strengths and experiences in working on source water protection issues. And the last part of this is also how do you sustain and expand partnerships for long-term engagement for source water protection. Next. Our presenters today will include Jim Taft and Kim Swan, discussing the National Source Water Collaborative, Clackamas River water providers, and perspectives and tips on forming and coordinating source water collaboratives. Jim Taft is Executive Director of the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators and is also co-chair to the Source Water Collaborative Steering Committee. Kim Swan is a water resources manager for the Clackamas River water providers, and she oversees is responsible for the watershed water quality and conservation programs, as well as day-to-day operations. Next. The third presenter will be Nicole Zaccarda-Pertosa, and she is with the Great Lakes Source Water Protection Group, and her current efforts is to launch the Great Lakes Water Protection Work Group. For those of you that don't know the Great Lakes Commission, it was established under state and U.S. federal law and dedicated to promoting a strong economic health, environment, and water, and high quality of the life for the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence region. And it is an international organization. So, next. For this webinar, please type your questions in the boxes provided in the dashboard on the right. We will not be taking verbal questions. We'll also be holding questions until the very end, but please make note of those questions as they occur to you during the presentations. We will answer. Also, there is a chat session if you wish to make comments during the webinar. Next. Please note these presentations for all the webinars, and this one included, will be recorded and provided online at the Source Water Collaborative Learning Exchange website as shown on the screen. Next. So without further ado, we have Jim Taft with us with ASWA and also the steering committee co-chair. Jim?
Thanks very much, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone. I am indeed the co-chair of the steering committee of the Source Water Collaborative and share that position along with my friend and colleague Dan Yates of the Groundwater Protection Council, and have been involved with the collaborative since its inception and forming 10 years ago, through helping it sustain its growth and the collaborative activities that we undertake today. So we are indeed celebrating 10 years, and we're very appreciative of that and appreciative of everyone's efforts over that time frame, some of which we'll share with you briefly this afternoon. What I'd like to do is reflect back on our motivations in forming the national level collaborative, initially discuss some of the steps that we've taken to sustain the collaborative, and talk a little bit about some of the work products. And in doing that, I'll actually be sort of paralleling some of the very same steps and considerations involved in standing up and sustaining local, regional, or state level collaboratives. Next. So this is actually a picture of the collaborative from a couple of years ago. And you can see the goal indicated there was to combine the strengths and tools of a diverse set of member organizations to protect drinking water sources for generations to come. A lofty goal, but an extremely important one. And then the particular vision statement that you see off to the right is associated with the document that we launched a couple of years ago, and I will be returning to that in just a moment. But I think just to share a little bit about the background of forming the collaborative, I'll note that the impetus for all of it was really a shared recognition among thought leaders at the federal, state, and local levels that the nature of the task, the effort that we have in front of us, protecting sources of drinking water, is complex and truly requires a team effort. There's no one entity or organization that has all of the resources, knowledge, or authorities it needs to accomplish the task on its own. So we really need to sort of jointly come together and share what we know, share our resources, share our expertise. We also felt that by forming a national level collaborative, we could model some of those collaborative behaviors and find ways that we can foster and support local collaboratives. So we are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, having grown from our original 13 members to 26 today. We focused a lot in the early years, I think, on finding common ground, a common language. We were a very disparate group of organizations, and still are, but we found that we have a lot in common, and a shared interest and a shared vision. So we've structured our activities and developed documents that help members see what they have in common, as well as hopefully establish some of the foundational building blocks for our collective efforts. Again, this is a national level collaborative. We are different from local, state, and watershed-based collaboratives, but we have many of the same challenges and opportunities. Next. So this is the actual vision statement and the signatures of the collaborative members, and I'll just read a couple of quick quotes from the document that you see there on the left. One of the excerpts is that we are committed to safe drinking water and hereby agree to work together at the source. It also indicates that drinking water protection should be integrated into the routine decisions that Americans make every day. and that the quality, quantity, and cost of drinking water depend not only on treatment and distribution, but also on land stewardship and planning decisions. So a set of common goals and objectives that make up our collective vision statement. Next. Here you can see how the Source Water Collaborative was developed and organized. And again, these are reflective of a lot of the steps that take place at the local level or at the regional level. So it's about identifying common ground, defining our intentions, having a vision statement or a mission statement, identifying leaders in a structure. So who are the folks that are going to kind of serve as the catalysts to keep the effort moving and to organize meetings and to sort of spur the collaborative on. So we have the co-chairs, we have a steering committee comprised of the groups that you see listed there, and we have a lot of subgroups and committees and work groups that have come together to carry out particular tasks and particular objectives. We also have membership considerations. What are the threshold, what are the qualifications for membership, as well as those that we consult with and who are supporters, but not necessarily members of the collaborative. Next. So we really seek to maintain our momentum and our activities. It's a lot about keeping partners motivated and engaged through various actions and projects. It's important, we think, to have regularly scheduled meetings. Sometimes you don't think you need them, but when you come together, you find out that you really do. We all have a lot of conferences and workshops, and so we try to share information with one another that can be presented at our respective workshops and seminars. This learning exchange is a great example of sharing some of those learnings and information. It's important to set goals and measure progress, and to take credit for the accomplishments that a collaborative activity undertakes, which is really a shared accomplishment. Those things are really possible because we work together. It's important to secure sustainable funding. So for us, there is a contractor that helps us with a lot of the logistics and organization, an EPA contractor, and then all of the other member organizations have in-kind contributions and things that they do. We think it's important to engage new partners where there is a good match between a potential partner organization and the activities of the collaborative. So again, it's momentum and energy sometimes ebbs and flows. That's understood and expected, but the question is, how do you sustain activities over a period of time? How do you organize yourselves? How do you form work groups to develop products and information and activities that benefit the collaborative and ultimately protect sources of drinking water? So for the National Collaborative, there have been quite a number of products and outputs. I'll just mention a few of them. We came together, for instance, to develop a research agenda. That led to the development of a source water protection cost-benefit tool. We have also really sought as a very high priority objective for us to support and foster local collaborative efforts. So we were instrumental, I think, in helping stand up some of them and really just coming alongside and helping others that were already well along. So some of the collaborative activities that we've worked with have been the Delaware River Basin Source Water Collaborative, the Salmon Falls Watershed Collaborative between Maine and New Hampshire, the Eastern Lancaster County in Pennsylvania Source Water Collaborative, a collaborative in Sheridan, Wyoming, and one in Wisconsin dealing with targeted watersheds. So those are just some that we've worked with specifically and directly. We've also developed quite a number of guidances, brochures, and products. Next. So the next slide just gives you a little bit of a flavor for some of those. So just briefly to touch on some of them, the one that says your water, your decision is one of the earlier products of the collaborative, really just to kind of make the case for local decision makers of the importance of source water protection and where to go for some basic information. Related to that, for a slightly different audience, is the document center at the bottom. It says advice worth drinking, really a planner's guide. So trying to insert considerations of source water protection into the planning process at the appropriate steps. I mentioned learning to speak a common language, and that was nowhere more evident than in the one on the lower left, working with our partners and colleagues in the agricultural community with the USDA Natural Resources Resource Service, as well as the National Association of Conservation Districts. And how do we work with them at the federal, state, and local levels to bring source water protection to the fore at the appropriate points. We also, as I mentioned just a moment ago, seek to foster and support ongoing collaboratives, and you see top center and top right information that speaks to that. We actually have a guidance document on how do you stand up a new collaborative, how do you support an existing collaborative. And then lower right, one of the tools that we think is extremely important for protecting sources of drinking water is the Clean Water Act. And so where in the various stages of Clean Water Act considerations and use of those tools can we insert source water protection considerations? And so we have an infographic that seeks to do that. Next, please. And just in the last couple of slides here, one of the documents that we produced about 1.5 years ago, in effect, is a bit of a recapitulation of the original vision mission statement in a way, but it was in response to the events in Charleston, West Virginia with the coal washing chemical, MCHM, that spill, the algal toxins in Toledo, both of which were sort of national events. How can we leverage that understanding and that awareness to kind of bump up and enhance and recommit ourselves to protecting the source? And so you see the call to action document on the right-hand side. It's about a 3-page document with a number of resources attached. That effort was led by the American Water Works Association, one of these committee members, and actually launched at a celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act. It is, as I said, a recommitment, but I think the thing that is really unique about it and important about it is that it, for every segment, federal, state, and local, it lists the sorts of considerations, the sorts of actions that different entities can take. So it's not just EPA, it's not just states, it's not just utilities. There's something there, I think, for everyone. I think that's one of the real strengths of the call to action. So I would commend that to your attention. Next. I mentioned at the outset that it's important to celebrate our accomplishments, and this year we attempted to do that with hopefully a very eye-catching, easy to assimilate accomplishments report that lays out some of the principal accomplishments over the last couple of years. So that's an important thing, I think, for a collaborative to do. Next. And then lastly, one of the most important documents we've developed, I think, is the How to Collaborate Toolkit and resources for starting or growing a collaborative. And the thing that I would mention here is that this is not the result of the National Source Water Collaborative members sort of sitting around and brainstorming, although it did involve brainstorming. It's about taking the lessons learned from actual collaboratives and sort of asking the tough questions. How did you sustain momentum? What were some of the obstacles that you overcame? How do you bring in some of the non-traditional partners, and compiling all of that? So I would say that it is a very not only very useful and well-considered document, but I think it's also very practical and has information based on existing collaboratives. So a little bit of a taste of the National Collaborative. Again, it's set up and designed to support your efforts in the field with regional, state, and local collaboratives. That is a huge part of our mission. Many of the things that we have wrestled with, I think, are the same things that you wrestle with at the local level. And lots of good resources, I think, for folks to take a look at. So with that, let me turn it back to Joe.
Thank you, Jim. The next presenter that we have is Kim Swan, and she is Water Resource Manager for the Clackamas River Water Providers. And Kim?
All right, thanks for having me. So I'm going to start off talking about our story of how we became a collaborative and kind of how we've continued to work together. So next. So I'm going to start by talking just a little bit to give everyone context, since I'm here on the West Coast, about where we are, because our watershed is kind of what got us moving in the direction of working together. So obviously when you look at watersheds, the size and scale and the breadth of boundaries that they overlap, whether it's national, state, county, local boundaries, it inherently points you in the direction of having to collaborate, because in some cases they're very large and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I work for a group of water providers, which I'll talk about a little bit more here in a couple more slides. But as water providers, we have no regulatory authority. So that provides even more incentive to look at ways to work with people who are in our watershed and look at what they're doing and how to do things better, because we can't tell or regulate any kind of land use that may happen up above our drinking water intakes. So next. So the previous slide kind of scaled from the Columbia watershed to the Willamette River watershed to, oh, can you go, thank you, to the Clackamas River watershed. So the Clackamas River watershed is actually a tributary to the Willamette. It's in the east part of the Portland metro area. So it in itself is pretty large, but it's also pretty unique. Next. So our watershed is 940 square miles. It's made up of 16 sub-watersheds. It flows 83 miles from the confluence. Can you go back one, please? Thanks. From Mount Hood to the confluence with the Willamette River. It's considered a multi-use watershed because we've got multiple different land uses, landowners. As you can see from the slide, it crosses 2 counties. We've got a variety of federal, state, and private landowners. So if you look at the map here, everything above the little town of Estacada is all national forest. So about 72% of our watershed is owned by the federal government. Along the edges of the national forest, we have some BLM land, as well as private timber. And then in the middle part of the watershed, we have lots of agricultural uses. And then down towards the bottom, we have a lot of urban and industrial uses. And in some ways, we're pretty unique because although we're a big watershed, we're not on the scale of the Willamette River or the Mississippi or some of the rivers back east. So although we have a lot to work with, it is in some ways somewhat manageable. Next slide. So to talk about some of the things that are happening in our watershed, we have lots of different land uses. So obviously in the top part of the watershed, which is forested, we do have some logging. The national forest nowadays is primarily just thinning. Although you can see from the picture of clear cut, we do have some clear cuts on the private timberland. Our watershed has lots of nurseries. We have some of the most productive nurseries in the country. I believe Clackamas County is one of the top growers for Christmas trees in the U.S. So we have lots of Christmas tree farms. We also have lots of wholesale nurseries, which ship plant material all over the U.S. We also have lots of recreation from fishing, hiking, camping, rafting, and hunting that go in the watershed. We also have listed fish species. So we have steelhead chinook, coho salmon, as well as lamprey and sea-run cutthroat trout. So we have fisheries, as well as dams. Portland General Electric provides hydroelectric power to this area of the region, and they have 5 dams on the Clackamas, along with 3 large dams on the main stem. So we have a lot of different people and a lot of different things going on the watershed, which innately require collaboration with other people to ensure that you're protecting drinking water. Next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the hows and whys of how the Clackamas River water providers started. We are somewhat unique because we are actually a coalition of municipal drinking water providers. So we already had existing relationships with each other. We all currently and previously had interties as well as water supply agreements. So coming together wasn't surprising, but our work in source water protection is somewhat new. And then in addition, with the exception of the city of Estacada, which is a very small town in the middle part of the watershed, the rest of our drinking water treatment plants, and we have 4 of them on the main stem of the Clackamas, are all at the very bottom of the watershed, literally the last 3 miles. So that is beneficial for us because it's closer to our customer bases, but it also means anything that happens within the watershed has the ability to impact the quality of the water that we then have to treat. Next. So to provide kind of a history of how we became what we are today, in the late 90s, it's actually the watershed that brought all of us as municipal drinking water providers together. And at that time, we've had federally listed salmon species in the basin. And most of the restoration and most of the focus on the watershed has primarily always been very fish-centric. Not that what's not good for fish isn't also good for drinking water, but at the time in the late 90s, we didn't even have a watershed council. So the water providers worked with the county and other stakeholders in the basin, and the Clackamas River Basin Council, which is our watershed council, was actually created. So that was one of the things that brought us together as we started looking at regulatory requirements and how to meet ESA for fish. And then in 2003, our Department of Environmental Quality conducted the source water assessments. And what these did was identify potential contaminant sources that could impact drinking water. So those were then identified for us, but creating a source water protection efforts or developing a plan was all voluntary. So we were beginning to think about it and work on projects, but our efforts were kind of scattered at this point still. So through the early 2000s, we conducted a number of studies with USGS. We did some pesticide studies and algal studies, and these were primarily funded through MOUs or joint funding agreements. And it was kind of very opportunistic. Whatever studies seemed to make sense, but there wasn't any real strategic pathway at this point. And then in 2005, we have water right issues that come into play. In the West here, we've got the prior appropriation doctrine, and we've got water rights because of restrictions being put on our water rights that forced all of our drinking water providers to work more closely together yet again. So to this point, although we have been working in the watershed and working together, most of our efforts were pretty free-form, and it was in-kind staffing, and it wasn't until 2007 that we actually created the Clackamas River Water Providers. Next. So the Clackamas River Water Providers is actually made up of all the organizations you see there. So it is a combination of 8 cities and water districts. And so the water providers saw the need to be proactively engaged in the watershed. But before the creation of the CRWP, it was through in-kind staffing and joint funding agreements, but there wasn't any structure and the staffing wasn't very equitable because the work happening benefited everyone. And so through the creation of the CRWP, it provided the structure to support funding, staff, and programs. Next. So this just shows graphically kind of our service area of where the water that we take out of the Clackamas River, where it goes. So on this graphic, for those of you that are familiar with the Portland metro area, the Clackamas comes into the Willamette River. So combined, we serve drinking water to over 300,000 people in the Portland metro area. And as you hopefully can maybe see from this map, in many cases, most of our water customers are not physically in the watershed per se. They, in some cases, like Lake Oswego and Tigard, are on the other side of the Willamette. Next. So to talk a little bit about our structure and how we became what we are today, participation in the CRWP is voluntary, and it is funded through membership dues. And so we were actually formed through a Chapter 190 intergovernmental agreement. So that allowed us to actually create a whole new autonomous organization. We have a board that is made up of representatives from each member organization, and we currently have a budget of a little over $500,000 a year, which funds staff time, overhead, as well as dollars for programs. And the dues are based off of finished water production. So every calendar year, we look at all the treatment plants, identify how much water was produced, and that gives us a percentage which goes into the total budget and pops out a number, which is what those members' dues. And that's pretty equitable because our small cities such as Estacada pay their proportion versus some of our larger cities or water districts. So we currently implement 2 programs. We implement a source water protection program and a public outreach and education program. And a lot of our messaging, in many cases, we have dual messaging because on one hand, we're communicating to our water customers because we're funded through water rates on why they need to be proactively engaged and why their rates are supporting source water protection efforts. And then the second messaging we have is to our watershed landowners, many of which do not necessarily get their water from the Clackamas River. Many are on wells. So, but they are the ones having an impact on land use within the watershed. So we have 2 different messages there. So the first couple of years of our organization was a lot of organizational building. Partly that was because we had a joint funding agreement versus a new intergovernmental agreement that kind of were in tangent with each other. And so we spent the first couple years, rewriting our IGA and our bylaws and kind of going through growing pains. And at that point, we were just kind of maintaining the previous work that we had been working on in the watershed. That kind of changed in 2010 when we actually developed and adopted a drinking water protection plan. And that plan is what has provided us with more strategic direction on how to be advocates for drinking water in our watershed and to look at how to partner with all of our other basin stakeholders. So some of our missions are, one, to foster closer relationships with us as water providers. As I said previously, we already had interties and water supply agreements. So the ability of meeting on a monthly or bi-monthly basis allowed us the ability to be in one room at one time and look at not only source water protection efforts, but also talk about distribution and other water provider specific areas where we might collaborate or find economies of scale. Obviously, by partnering in this manner, we're able to collectively fund and coordinate our efforts for source water protection. So this is very beneficial to all the organizations I work with because they have a variety of size and scale. And so rather than each of those agencies having source water protection staff and having to fund FTE and salaries, they are collectively funding a joint effort. So it ends up being a lot more cost effective for those organizations. And through that, of course, we see economies of scale and are able to share money because we are jointly funding studies, water quality monitoring, and the programs that we do. And probably one of the best things that has resulted from this is, although we are a collaborative of water providers, because of the nature of our watershed, it forces us to work with our local watershed council, with our soil and conservation district, with our county, with Portland General Electric, with the Forest Service. And through this collaborative, we are able to speak in one voice on water resource issues when we work in the basin with these other stakeholders. And that has been really important because for them, they don't have to track down 8 different organizations. They have one person that they can go to ask questions or get information from. Next. So some of our main program goals for our source water protection efforts are to identify, prevent, minimize, and mitigate activities that can impact drinking water quality. So as I mentioned, we've had a lot of restoration efforts in our watershed and a lot of work going on, but in the past it's always been very fish-centric. So no one ever looked at it through the lens of what other things could be potentially impacting drinking water quality. So our intent is to work together and provide that lens and that focus to our efforts. And to be honest, when we talk with a lot of our landowners and our stakeholders in the basin, it's not that people don't want to protect endangered fish species, but in some respects, people have kind of been beaten over the head with that. And so when you bring in drinking water, that this is also a drinking water source, that seems to resonate and helps with this messaging and with these efforts. Our other goal, obviously, is to promote public awareness and stewardship, not only in the way we as water users are engaged in the watershed, but to get our communities that are using that water, as well as our communities in the watershed, to understand and be part of creating a healthy watershed for us. Next. So in keeping our collaborative together, although we definitely had growing pains, we're actually going into our 9th year as a collaborative through the Clackamas River Water Providers. And we have learned a lot in the last couple of years, and because we are funded through water rate funding, we have a pretty stable funding source. And we develop a budget every year. We have a 5-year work plan. So our membership has an idea of where we're going and has the ability to provide input into how we are engaged in our watershed. And as source water protection has become more prevalent, and as people are becoming more aware of it, we found our water customers are definitely asking questions and wanting to know how we are engaged. So there hasn't been any decline in our wanting to be engaged in the watershed. And when you look at the kind of threats that we've identified that are potentially upriver from our drinking water intakes, this provides the necessary need and incentive to keep our engagement in the watershed. And so when you look at this list, because of the nature of our watershed, we have a lot of different things going on. And so that allows us lots of different conversations that our customers and our water providers will understand and recognize the benefit of being an active player in these kind of conversations. Okay, next. So as a result of a lot of work we've done in the last couple of years doing both GIS risk analysis on the different kind of land uses in our watershed, which include forestry, agriculture, looking at septic systems, water quality permits in our basin, what kind of urban development is happening at the bottom. That has helped us identify a number of different programs that we have been working on. So this is just kind of a list of a few of the watershed programs that we support and are engaged in. So we've got a variety of different efforts that we support and implement every year. Many of these programs we work with our other basin stakeholders to help implement, but are pretty integral to what we are doing. And next. And then here are some of our outreach programs. So we found very quickly our outreach program started primarily talking just about water conservation, and we found that most of our customers, because unfortunately in the water industry we tend to silo our conversations, but our customers understood more about and wanted to know where their water came from, what some of our concerns were, how their water got treated, how we moved it, what happened to it when they were done. So we found that our original outreach messaging started out being solely water conservation, has now broadened into a much more holistic water resource messaging. And a lot of that comes because it complements our source water protection efforts. So we have a huge youth education program. We go into our schools. We partner and make sure our messaging with our basin partners is consistent and supportive of each other. We do workshops, community events, a variety of different presentations. We develop all sorts of outreach materials and tools. And then we also implement a conservation rebate program for our members. So I'm not going to talk about any of these in detail, but if you're interested in knowing exactly what we're doing in our watershed, there's a lot of good information on our website. Next, which can be found here. So if you go there, you can find out in more detail some of the stuff we're working on in our basin. Next.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Next we have Nicole Zaccardo-Pertosa, and she's with the Great Lakes Commission, and she's going to be presenting on her efforts to launch the Great Lakes Source Water Protection Work Group. Nicole?
Good afternoon. I will try to catch us up on time also, so we still have room for questions. So yes, I am with the Great Lakes Commission. We have to start all of our presentations with a glamour shot of the Great Lakes. So what you see there on your screen is Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lake Shore on Lake Michigan. Next. Okay, so I thought I should also tell you a little bit more about the Commission. Jolie shared at the beginning of our hour that we are a binational organization. We were created by the United States Congress in 1955, so last year we celebrated our 60th birthday. And then in the late 90s, Ontario and Quebec joined our membership. So we do work on both sides of the border with 10 jurisdictions. and follow the general premise that when we speak together with a unified voice, we are stronger in promoting Great Lakes priorities. Next. So one thing that we always like to share when we talk about the Great Lakes is that they are immense. We're talking about 1/5 of the world's supply of fresh surface water and a drinking water supply for more than 40 million people in the U.S. and Canada. We're also a huge driver of the Great Lakes economy with $62 billion with a B in wages annually that come from the lakes. And of course, for anyone that's visited in the summertime, you know that we are a recreational powerhouse with recreation and maritime sectors adding even more to our economy. And so in recent years, thought leaders in the Great Lakes have really started to call this the Great Lakes Blue Economy. And we've been very focused here at the Great Lakes Commission in finding new ways to talk about this blue economy and protect our lakes into the future, including that drinking water source. Next. So what we're trying to focus on is the idea that we're investing all of this energy and money in improving and sustaining the Great Lakes, but what do we expect from these investments? How are we measuring our results? Are we really certain that the investments that are being poured into the Great Lakes system, and when we speak about the Great Lakes, we do also include the St. Lawrence Seaway, are we getting the outcomes that we expect from those investments? Next. So jumping off from this concept of a blue economy, in 2013, the Council of Great Lakes Governors tasked the Great Lakes Commission with coming up with a new way of thinking about how we measure success within that blue economy. And the outcome of that is blue accounting. It's a strategic approach for measuring progress toward collective outcomes. And what we have there is just a shot of the March 2014 report that was produced by the Commission. You can find it on our website, and though I'm sort of a nerd about blue accounting, it is a really good read and includes a pretty detailed section discussing drinking water. Next. So after the report came out, we were very grateful to find some funding from private foundations. A number of private foundations have gotten behind this blue accounting concept, and we've partnered with the Nature Conservancy with our large-scale goal for blue accounting being the development of an information management strategy and system that would be web-based, where as we're talking about measuring outcomes in the blue economy through blue accounting, that we have a way to communicate those results to the public. Next. So in the blue accounting report, the concept really got structured into 9 desired outcomes with 3 buckets: social values, sustainable human uses, and healthy aquatic ecosystems. And from those 9 desired outcomes, a number of ideas, again through this funding from private foundations, are being piloted over the next 5 years to test the blue accounting process. Next. So where the Great Lakes Commission is particularly focused now is on this outcome involving safe and sustainable domestic water supply. Next. Okay, so how are we going to do this? What we're launching in early 2017 is a project we're calling the Great Lakes Source Water Initiative. And following this blue accounting premise, what we are going to do to get to that safe and sustainable water supply desired outcome is to focus on regional goals for source water protection, the appropriate metrics that could actually measure progress toward those regional goals, and assembling and aggregating the available data that informs those metrics. So our aspiration is to have our project serve as an incubator of sorts for local efforts within the basin so that we can facilitate and enhance existing source water protection efforts, get new groups going, and have all of those activities set against this blue accounting backdrop where we have data, metrics, and goals so that we can measure our progress and demonstrate to our Great Lakes citizens that we are making progress in meeting the desired outcome. Next. So what we're doing at this point is recruiting a diverse work group of water professionals. At this point, I think that as many many perspectives and positions as we can get at the table is the best way to approach this, because we do recognize that our geography is immense. When we're talking about a Great Lakes Basin-wide effort, we're talking about all 10 of our jurisdictions that touch the Great Lakes, and again, that binational aspect in bringing in Ontario and Quebec. We want to work with partners both in the public and not-for-profit sector and at all levels of government. So including those that are working for suppliers of water on up through state level Safe Drinking Water Act agencies and up to the federal government and agencies that are working in source water protection, Clean Water Act issues, and so on. And one of the key last pieces we're looking in recruiting members for our work group is the ability to access and share data relevant to our efforts. Again, since we're attempting to build a data-driven platform to show progress toward those desired outcomes, we need to be able to assemble and distill the data down in a manner where we can support the identified metrics and goals. Next. So where we're headed with this, we are looking to convene a work group and hold a kickoff meeting sometime early in 2017. From there, during the kickoff meeting and continuing probably through a series of webinars and conference calls, we are going to attempt to set shared goals for Great Lakes source water quality. We recognize that's a bold proposition, again, given that the geography is immense and the issues that distinct jurisdictions and water bodies face will be diverse, but we're hopeful that we can come up with a suitable umbrella of goals that will work for most. Once we have our goals, we will shoot for early summer to define metrics to inform those goals. And then from there, we're actually going to scale down. We're going to start big and then scale small to select some pilot locations within the Great Lakes Basin. Through our funding obligations, we know that one of those pilot locations will be targeting the western Lake Erie Basin, where Toledo experienced its water issues in the summer of 2014. But otherwise, the additional pilots will be anywhere within the basin, anywhere on either side of the U.S.-Canada border. And then we'll use those pilot locations to really start to assemble and aggregate the data to inform the metrics. And hopefully, by late 2017, we will have at least the platform in beta version so that we can deliver the information and see if this blue accounting process is as good as we suspect it might be for informing the public and aiding Great Lakes decision makers in setting sound policy for source water protection. Next. So this is my big question for the folks that are assembled for this webinar today and for the talented colleagues that have been working for 10 years with the National Collaborative is, as we are starting out in this effort, again, we're forming a work group versus a capital C collaborative, but we're really interested in hearing from those that have been working on these issues for some time is how do we build value into these efforts that we're launching? What ideas could we build in as we're ramping up and recruiting and bringing this work group together so that it's time well spent by them as they're joining this effort? I understand that we'll be using the webinar function with questions, but this would also be a place where if you have ideas, please feel free to share them in that way. I've been told by the organizers that even if we don't discuss everyone's ideas today for lack of time, that those would be shared with me, and I would love for folks to reach out and share your expertise. Next. Okay, so there's our funders. We have the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Joyce Foundation, and the Herb Family Foundation have all provided support for our Blue Accounting project, as I mentioned, over the next 5 years, although we're working initially on a pretty tight 2-year turnaround to try to deliver on our information platform with respect to source water protection. Next. Okay, and again, we'll use the webinar function to submit questions, so I thank everyone for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Nicole. That's an excellent presentation. I want to remind everyone that you need to there is a question box, and you can submit questions for any of the presenters now. We have approximately 5 minutes left in the webinar. So please remember to do that, to provide those questions. Right now, we do have several questions right now for Kim concerning, the first question is the 500,000. Can you give some more information about how the 500,000 annual budget is used? Is any of it used directly to support on the ground protection, purchasing land for protection, that sort of thing, or restoration projects, repairing failing septic systems in the watershed?
Sure. So we have an annual budget process similar to any local government. So the budget is with my board and goes through an approval process, and our 5-year work plan kind of informs what is in the budget year to year. About half of the budget supports staff salaries and benefits, but it also does support programs. So the source water protection portion of the budget is typically around $200,000 a year, and our public outreach and education is about $65,000 a year. And so on the source water protection side, we're not at a point currently where we're actually acquiring land, although that is identified as a tool in our drinking water protection plan. But right now, a lot of that funding goes to funding USGS water quality monitors in the station, as well as supporting a variety of other smaller programs. So we support pesticide reduction efforts. We are doing a lot of hazardous material work with our first responders. We've been developing geographic response plans. Some of that funding goes to supporting septic system workshops and materials. And if you're interested in going, for those of you who want to know more specifically how our budget is spent, if you go onto our website, we produce an annual report every year, which is on our website, a couple different places under resources, as well as under agenda and minutes, I believe. That annual report kind of outlines everything our funding is used for. So a variety of studies, and to be honest, in our watershed, we're probably least concerned with our forestry impacts as we are with pesticides, septic systems, and hazardous materials in the lower part of the basin. So most of our funding and efforts have focused on those to date.
Great. The second part, kind of related to that, is what type of effort did it require to achieve annual water supplier dues to fund the operating budget for the Source Water Protection Collaborative in Washington?
You know, to date, because we have an intergovernmental agreement that forms us and provides the framework for our process and our budget, all of my members have been very supportive of supporting their due share and our budget. Of course, every year if we want to expand on our projects or our workload, not so much recently, but a couple years ago, I would get a little bit of pushback on not increasing dues greatly. But so far, there's been a lot of support for supporting these programs. And I think most of my members realize that it's still much more cost-effective for them to jointly fund this than to do it on their own. And occasionally we'll have to remind people what they're paying for, that you get 2 staff people, you get all this work being done on behalf of your agency. So, but to date it's been very supportive. We actually just recently conducted a survey using Portland State University to kind of get a sense on if how comfortable our ratepayers were making that investment in source water protection, and would they be willing to increase that investment. Because right now, because the utilities I work for are all so different, it's not that you don't see a source water protection fee on their water bill or anything. So the results of that study should be finished this fall, and it will be hopefully good news showing that our customers are willing to support these efforts and expand our financial contribution.
Very good. Right now, that is all the questions that we received, and we've actually come to the end of our session. And wanted to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available through the Source Water Collaborative Learning Exchange website. It's nicely laid out with tabs for each of the month's webinars, and you can easily find the webinar when it is posted. Next, I would like to thank all of the presenters. They were all excellent presentations and gave us a lot to think about as far as forming and sustaining Source Water Collaborative. So thank you, and have a good day.